Welcome to the Science and Spirituality Podcast, where we dive deep into universal spiritual principles and ground them in modern science. My name is Chris Carden.
And my name is Kevin Carden. And we are committed to simplifying the spiritual side of success for you with easy to understand scientific research so you could walk away with practical tools to create radical transformations in your life. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Science and Spirituality Podcast. My name is Kevin Carden. We got Chris Carden here as usual, and I'm excited for this episode because I've been feeling this for the last 24 hours myself about perfectionism and letting go of perfectionism and making it okay that we are not perfect and that we make mistakes, and how we can really feel that, not just understand that as a concept, as something that's good to incorporate in our lives, but something that we're actually living, we're feeling, and we're vibing with, for lack of a better term. So where it's actually changing our life. It's not something that we just think of and know about intellectually. So let's dive in.
Yeah, and I think that's like what you just said at the very end too. That also applies to literally almost every single topic we talk about on this podcast, and every single topic of transformation and learning that you're going to go through, you as the listener, is that jump between knowing about it and like reading about it and conceptually understanding it, listening to a podcast and being like, oh yeah, like that makes a lot of sense. And then actually doing it and feeling it for yourself and being that thing, like being that person, trying it out and being like, wow, this actually does make a difference. So that's like always like the jump that we're all gonna have to make. And we've made it in a lot of aspects in our life, Kev, and there's also areas where we're still in the process of making that jump.
Yeah.
So really important that you brought that up. But I think I wanted to start this topic on perfectionism with just talking about how perfectionism is at odds with how the world actually is. So I know we were talking about this a little bit before we started, but in the quest for perfectionism is the quest for certainty. Like we want things to be certain. And so when all of the things line up in a perfect way in our minds, where our human minds are like, yes, like I understand this, like this is how it's going to go. It's going to go A, B, C, and then D. But a lot of times in life, the reality is that sometimes things go from A to D, then back to C, then to B. And because of this, the dualism here, like the difference between what goes on in our heads and what actually happens in reality, we can get caught up on perfectionism because, like I said, our brains are like, I want this to be certain, but the nature of life is uncertainty. And so I think having a basic understanding of that at first maybe can help some people be like, okay, like my perfectionism, if I have it, it's understandable because that's the way the human mind works. But then also to understand that I'm going up against a world that's not perfect.
Yeah. I think it's kind of a paradox, but you can, this is just how I'm thinking about it, is that you can actually find certainty in uncertainty. Like you could be certain that there is going to be uncertainty. Like you're not going to know what is going to happen. And also that you're not going to be perfect at everything.
Yeah.
And you can't make everything exactly as you want it to be in terms of the way things happen. Like we can and do create the reality that we want. Like we can create the experience that we want to create. And it's almost like, at least in my experience in building dreams, like it's 99.9% of the time, it's never the way I think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so like you can be certain about that.
And I think the key comes in like if you understand that there's not going to be perfection and that things are going to be uncertain, the key becomes in the micro adjustments that you can make. And I think understanding that things won't be perfect allow you to be flexible to make those adjustments. Because if you're like, everything needs to be perfect, you're going to continue down a path that might not be correct because you're going to force it.
Yeah.
Like this is the way. And there was an example I read in a book pretty recently about how that's how autopilot works with like planes. It's not that the plane goes from Miami to New York like in one straight line. It's constantly making tiny little adjustments over and over and over and over again. And if the plane waited for, let's say, like 20 minutes to make the first adjustment, it would be way off course. It's setting the course, but then being like aware that you're going to have to make little micro adjustments along the way. And the more open you are to being veered off course and being put back on course, the better that you're going to be because you're going to have that flexibility already baked into your plan.
Yeah. Another great example that brings up in my mind is how sailboats actually sail. It's called tacking. I've learned this. I learned this. I was at a seminar and there was a man who was teaching this, and it was about life and how it relates to life. But he literally he could sail, and so how a sailboat runs is that it literally like goes like one direction, I like, you know, a little bit off to the right, and then it brings itself back to the left a bit. So like that straight line that it's trying to go on, it never is on that straight line. It just like goes back and forth all the way to its destination. And so it's called tacking. And so that's literally just how it works. So it's just getting those adjustments and being okay with that. Because like, you know, if this, you know, a plane on autopilot or a sailor sailing the sailboat was tacking, like if he thought that it was wrong to be off track, then you would never get to his destination because he would try stopping like, oh, I have to be perfect right on the same line going straight to my destination.
It
But
would be
that's just never how it is.
it
Huh?
would be so frustrating too and tiring. Like it would burn you
Yeah,
out. And that's what
exactly.
happens to a lot of people. They're like, this has to be this way. This has to be perfect. And the minute that they come up to a wall of something that's not perfect or the imperfections start to show themselves, they either quit or they try to force it more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, and I had an example I want to share. Just this happened to me last night. I had like my own bouts with perfectionism. I wanted to do a full moon ritual because as the recording of this, it's May 8th, and yesterday was a full moon. And I wanted to do a releasing ceremony for myself to write out all the things that I was holding against myself, like judgment, self criticism, and like the lack of depth of feeling that I have for, say, like, you know, taking things for granted, whatever. I wanted to let go of so many things and write it down and literally burn the sheet of paper that I wrote all these things down on. And I was like really excited for it leading up to this. But then when the time came, it was like 7 or 8 o'clock. Like I wanted to actually do this. I noticed there's like tremendous resistance to doing it. And I procrastinated for like an hour and a half. And a part of me was thinking like, oh, like I'm this is bad. Like you know, I shouldn't be doing this. I should just go for it. But like and these thoughts like came up here and there, but like I just threw it out of mind and just like procrastinated. You know, I watched an episode of like a show that I'm watching on Netflix and all this stuff. And, but then finally when I came around to doing it in this full moon ceremony, I realized that it was actually in divine timing. That number one, I was noticing my resistance and noticing the judgment I had towards myself for not doing it when I said I wanted to do it. And then, but then in fact, when I actually sat down to do it around like 8:30, I looked out my window and the full moon was actually finally rising. If I actually did it before then and try to fit into the perfectionism I thought I should do, then I actually would have seen the full moon and the experience would have been completely different. So in a
Yeah.
way, like it was perfect the way it worked out, even with me not being perfect. So like
Mhm.
the quote unquote mistake was actually in alignment with like how things were supposed to happen. And for me to become aware of, you know, my own beliefs and my own judgments towards myself. So I was able to release even that.
Yeah. That's a good story. I mean, I have like a lot of like examples of like perfectionism and just that like for me though, I think the way that perfectionism gets me the most is in starting things because
Mm,
I always feel like the timing needs to be perfect or like for example, like learning about Chinese medicine, for example, there's so much to learn that me wanting to know everything stops me sometimes from even getting started in the first place because I can see how long the road's going to be and I'm like, damn, I'm never going to be able to get perfect or know as much as the masters about this, so like why even begin?
mm,
But it's like you have to begin. Like it's
yeah.
going back to our last episode, like everyone's always going to be a beginner. And you know, while you were talking, Kev, too, I thought about just something that came into my head about perfection. And I don't think it's possible to be perfect because I think once you're perfect, like there's no more growth. Like I
Yeah.
think the imperfections that we go through in life show us where we need to push the boundaries and grow from.
Hmm.
And life's about growth and it's always expanding. So even if you come to a place where you feel like you perfectly mastered something,
You
the
didn't.
next second there's going to be more growth that you're going to have to do because then it's like time's moving on, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's always going to be someone trying to be better than you, or there's always going to be someone pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
So when we look at our imperfections as ways that we can grow, it also places a different meaning on those imperfections and kind of reframes them as a good thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Cause it is good. Like
Yeah.
life itself just always wants to grow and we are a part of life. We have that spirit of life within us. And so we see that life wanting to grow in the macro of like our galaxy literally expanding. Like scientists have proven that our universe is constantly expanding outward. And then we feel that within ourselves, but then we even see that literally in the lowest forms of life, like a blade of grass. It's pressing to its newest green growing edge, like it's growing. And so we all have that pull of becoming. And so if we lock onto perfectionism, like there's some end goal, like we're gonna, perfect something and be a master so perfectly that we have nothing else to learn, then we're literally saying, I want to die. Because only in death do we stop growing. And even, I mean, even an
Maybe
argument
not
for that, like,
spiritually.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We can still
And then,
grow after death. So like it's never ending to be
yeah.
honest. So
Um, Jen, I know that when we started this episode, we wanted to have something at the end for like
practical
practical.
tips.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, I mean, I just thought of one, like, because you were talking about a blade of grass and about nature, right? It's like go outside and take a walk and just look at nature. Like, nature's not perfect. Like, bushes grow in weird ways. Like, trees are like,
and
growing in things. Yeah. And you ever seen a tree like literally grow through like a fence?
yeah,
It'll engulf the fence. So
yeah.
it's like the tree doesn't care about being perfect. It just grows.
It just
Like,
is. Like, sup, dude, I'm alive.
that is, yeah. Yeah. It's like, yo, the sun's that way. Let me go that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I feel like that's in a lot of cases. Like even the blade of grass example is what I thought of because I walk, laid outside a lot, and I'm like, yo, this grass it's amazing. But when you really look at it, it's like it's not perfect, but like it
Yeah.
is. It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's perfect in its imperfection. Just
Yeah.
like, again, I was going back to like the paradox of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one thing. And then the other tool that we mentioned before, like before we started recording, I want to touch on is that, like, yes, like I think it's great. Like going out for a walk, noticing and realizing that all of life is never perfect, but it's just being itself, and we could do that as well in our lives. But also just to go after those parts of you that think you need to be perfect. It's like literally make a list. Like, where do I think I need to be perfect, and then tell yourself the truth. Like, I mean, I literally, I did that in a way myself last night with writing down the things that I, criticize myself for, judge myself. And like, cause I have, a lot of those things were like out of perfection is like, I need to be perfect in terms of say like my business and how I'm a coach and like, but I really just acknowledging my path. So like, again, like writing down the places where you think that you need to be perfect, and then tell yourself the truth that number one, like you have grown immensely in it, but then number two, that it's never going to be perfect, and then that's actually good. So we need
Mhm.
to come back to the foundation of truth, and going back to the very beginning of what we touched on, that can't just be a concept in your mind, but something that you actually feel and experience. I've found journaling and writing things down is one of the most powerful ways to turn it from intellectual knowledge and something in your mind to then something where you feel, because you're actually expressing it. It's not something that you're just thinking about, but you're actually just dropping down into your heart to actually put down on paper.
And
Or
then
yeah, or even having a conversation about it too. Like it
yeah.
doesn't have to be just writing it on paper, but although you were about to say something about that.
I was going to say, well, writing on paper, if you think about the act of writing, it's literally like a thought from your brain transferring into your body, into your arm, and writing it down.
Yeah.
So it's like it's literally it's in going from mind body, and it's making that connection between it. So that's why I think writing is so powerful when you write stuff out.
Yeah, for sure.
That connection. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'd suggest that as a tool from
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback onto that and just say that for people who are going through like maybe something really hard right now, where you're listening to this and you're like, no, like I'm not perfect. Like it's just not like the thing I'm going through right now is just there's no way this could be good. Just think in the past about things that didn't seem good, and then reflect on how those things actually turned out to be good. Because sometimes when we're in the moment of something and we're really struggling with something, we can't see back in the past of how we might have been struggling just as much and how it actually turned out to be good, because we focus all our energy on just what's happening now.
Yeah.
So I just want to piggyback on that exercise and how good it can actually be in healing and then moving forward too with stuff.
Yeah. Like my story is a perfect example of that I just want to share really briefly, that the reason I actually left school, I was in a 6-year program to get my doctorate, and I really didn't want to be there anymore. After 3 years, I really found out that it wasn't my purpose. And in my 4th year, I failed a required pharmacy course. And so it kind of nudged me in the right direction. Like I was disappointed, I was discouraged, I felt bad about it. And because I had never failed a class, so that was a bit of my perfectionism. But that failure actually helped me make the decision I actually wanted to make anyway. And so looking back, I'm really grateful that I made those mistakes and failed, because that propelled me to where I am today, where I own my own business and am a coach. So Yeah, it's powerful. So you listening, do it. Don't just listen. Take the time. Just send it. Yeah. Even if it's just like 5, like the releasing ceremony for myself took about like 20 minutes last night, but it doesn't even have to take that long. Just take 5 minutes and journal a bit, write about it, and just go within the experience, go within yourself, because no amount of information will produce transformation unless you act on it. Ooh, that was good. Whew. I'm gonna quote myself. I want to.
I thought that was like a quote you've heard somewhere. That just
no. It was kind of like a translation, my own version of Mary's quote, where she says, "Inspiration without action is merely entertainment." But I liked my way of putting it. Say it again.
I think yours is better.
Bet. What did I say again?
I don't know.
Like
information, transformation, something.
No amount of information can produce transformation unless you act on it. Was that it?
Yeah.
I think the end.
That can apply to like everything, like even like the body, right? Like, so for example, like learning more about food sensitivities and stuff, you're providing more information to your system. Yeah. But if you don't act on it and actually remove the foods, you're not going to produce any transformation.
Yeah.
So it's like too much information.
Yeah. Information overload.
You should definitely write that down.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to this recording and write that exact quote down, because that was, oh my God, that felt good coming out of my mouth. Yeah, let's end that there, because there's a couple of things that, the listener can take action on, and get busy. So talk to you on another episode. That's it for today. So thanks for tuning in, and we really hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. So any questions, any comments, just connect with us on Instagram. You could always DM us at Kevin Francis Carton
and at Chris J. Carton. And also, if you feel guided to, the one thing we do ask is for you to please rate the podcast and leave us a review. This way we can reach more people and impact more lives with this amazing information. With that, we'll see you on the next episode.